Thank you for being here. Today we have a great webinar about digital leadership. How can you as a leader make the most of digital tools as a leader into our future? Our speakers today is Lisa Fong, Communication Director, UN Representative, BPW International, immediate past President of BPW Hong Kong Club. Darshini Santhanam, Head of Customer Training for Google Cloud, First Vice President of BPW Singapore Club. Sheerah Kim, Senior Analyst Corporate Strategic Development Communication Officer, BPW Europe member, BPW Zurich Club. Dr. Alexandra Simonova Forssell, Risk Advisor Director, Certified in Digital Security and Human Rights, Vice President, BPW Grand Cayman Club. Thank you for all of you to be here. And we will start with Lisa. Lisa, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yasmin, for the kind introduction. So my sharing and topic for this webinar is on communications, and I'm going to take you to two main parts. First is internal communications, and the second one is external communications. First, for the internal communication, I think as a BPW leader, our members are our bloodline. We need to nurture our own members in their professional development, our community, but also develop the youth of tomorrow. With that, internal communication is critical and key. And I think there are, including my own club, BPW Hong Kong, there is a lot that we can be doing better. I think if you think of communication with members, traditionally it could be on email, maybe you mail stuff to your members or in-person meeting. But I think with what happened with COVID-19, it all accelerated that, and we're all going digital. I don't think that that's news to anyone here. We've all been through that. And I feel like we still have a bit more to go. In this new normal, I think we have adapted already to a lot more usage on email, on Messenger, on the likes of WhatsApp or other different tools, as well as connecting with our members through video chat. Those are all very important channels to keep engaging our members. However, you also need to think beyond that. I think most importantly for communication is being able to understand and stand in the audience shoes. So as a member of your club, what are they receiving? Is it consistent? Is it what they want to read or want to see, or announcement that they wanted to know about? I think it is partly psychology as well, like to understand what the motivation are for them to, one, stay in the club, two, to continue to engage with us. So what come in handy for us at BPW? We find that short newsletter, through WhatsApp or on email actually is quite convenient, and a lot of our members find it very useful for them to keep up to date. They get to read them in their own time as well. So it's very easy for them to just tune in and tune out whenever they want. Second, we have a website, obviously, but also a blog section that we update regularly with our events. I think this one is for those perhaps that are too busy, may not always check their emails often. And some members are like that, right? So they would prefer to search and find their information when they need it instead. The other is on developing content for your internal audience. A lot of members are in your club for a certain reason, be it advocacy or professional development. Are you satisfying their curiosity there? I think that's a question to ask as well, and fulfill that gap. Because if you don't meet that gap, obviously they will be, thinking of perhaps going somewhere else. So I think for internal audience, those are some key points, but I think there's one point that I want you to take away is consistency in the communication with your members. I think that's like ultimately like the key of it all. Moving on to external communication, I think this for us, it's very important. I think in the corporate world, a lot of the time we talk about reputation capital. What is the value of BPW Club, like your club and your reputation? Even if you don't put a dollar value to it, to a certain extent, is it to the point where it is well known in the whole town that you're in, for example? If it's not, there are obviously barriers to that, and you should work to address that. So I think external stakeholders include the government, any other association, peers, media, prospective members. So all these, I think we need to think about how we're engaging with them as well. And for external communication, this is also my bread and butter for my day job. Our industry, we typically break it down into 3 parts. So you have the owned, the earned, and the paid. So the owned platforms are things like your website, your social media, any marketing materials that go out. Obviously, all these that go out that you own have to be consistent, has to be updated regularly. And so that any audiences that look at all your content, they can see that there is a consistency. It is the same brand, is the same association, and there's no, confusion that perhaps I've hopped onto another website. Second is earned media. This includes any media engagement, interviews that you've done in any publications. It includes third-party endorsement or validation or partnership, for example. And the earn portion of it, what it does is that it has a third-party validation to our brand, to your club, as an association that is embedded in the society, for example. To give you a quick example, BPW Hong Kong, we partner a lot with other clubs and associations here. It helped us to expand our membership bases. It helped us to get our brands out there. And it helped us to be on top of, key developments and trends as well. So that earn part is very important for us. Lastly, is paid. The paid proportion, everything from marketing ads that you put, native advertising, sometimes article that you publish on other websites, and SEO, so search engine optimization, to help with your web page and website. The paid option obviously is way more targeted, and I think I think as each of your club, I think there's obviously different situation. You need to decide whether, one, if the investment is worth it. For example, if you want to increase drastically the numbers of members that we have, targeting certain age group of women in a certain area, paid option is great for that. You will be able to reach that audience directly. But perhaps if that's not the case, then perhaps using own media or earned media could be a better way to go. But I think for external engagement and external communication, it comes down to, from all the platforms that I mentioned, I think it comes down to also just being out there and being seen. I think sometimes we focus a lot of the internal operation, but we're not being seen out in the public, and therefore we're not consistently building our brand and reputation. And obviously the BPW International brand needs all of us, for us to continue to build our brand in our different markets in order for it to thrive. With that, I'll pass it back to the moderator.
I think Dr. Yasmin may have stepped away. Okay, next we will be hearing from Darshini. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ann. I can't help but think that there's this beautiful natural flow to what we've been talking about. Lisa has shared some incredible tips around how we need to be communicating internally and externally, both within the club and then externally about the club. I'm going to double click on that. And in the next 8-9 minutes, I will share a few tips that'll help you engage your audience better at those points where you are indeed actually communicating with them and connecting with them. Now, the last 2 years, it's safe to say that we've all become experts with this medium of having to meet virtually, of meeting large groups virtually, smaller groups, trying to get work done, but also trying to actually generate new ideas. Before I go into my segment, I have a quick question for everyone who is with us today. If you could go into the chat box and quickly share with me one amazing thing that you think you've now been able to do with online meetings and video calls, that would be awesome. Super quick, like something as simple as being able to manage your time better, or something as detailed as actually getting more done in the day. On a range of 0 to 10, anything is amazing. So please share with me really quickly in the chat box, what one amazing thing you've been able to achieve. Brilliant. I'm getting some great responses here. We've got reaching more members, reduced travel time, getting feedback, faster turnaround times, meeting international groups. Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Please do continue to drop your messages in there, and I'll come back and have a look. But let me jump into it. So what makes engagements that much more online for your, what makes engagements that much more exciting for your members online? I'm going to share 5 simple rules. 1, check in with your attendees. You may notice that I just took 25 to 30 seconds to ask you the question that I did, but everyone sat up and gave me a response. So doing that quick check-in actually allows you to take a moment to be really authentic. It allows everyone to take that moment to get familiar with the platform, because let's face it, we're platform switching constantly. It also warms people's fingertips up to start using the chat function. So when you actually require the engagement further down the road, you've got a group of people who are already accustomed to it. The other thing I like to do when the chat function is nice and active is to create what I call a parking lot, where I drop questions that I think I want to address later, further down the road, but may not want to address right away. I do want to acknowledge, though, that people may have questions, so it's a good idea to create a little parking lot and keep all your questions there. Finally, and most importantly, it helps people to speak up. Some people like to use long sentences, some people like to use quick, short words. Irrespective of people's preferences for communicating, it gives everybody an equal chance to actually be able to speak up. So rule number 1, check in with your attendees. Rule number 2, break the ice. So doing a quick introduction, doing a quick round of what's your favorite color, or going into quick games, puzzles, etc. are great ways to actually break the ice. Today, because we haven't seen each other face to face, even if you're meeting with people you know, there is severe exhaustion. So sometimes actually investing a few minutes of your meeting time towards breaking the ice and just reconnecting as human beings can go a really long way to having a more productive engagement. It's a great way to test your ground rules that you set as you kick off the meeting, whether it's around video on off, whether it's around using a parking lot, whether it's around how we engage or how we're going to have a detailed whiteboarding discussion. All of that is handy to set up front, and a game is a great way to set expectations around it. Rule number 3, manage questions. As someone who's leading that engagement, or as someone who's leading a presentation, it's very important for you to have a clear strategy going into this for how you want to answer questions. Most video platforms have the option of putting your hand up if you have a question. They have the option of leaving questions in a place. You have your chat box. Have a strategy for how you want to leverage it. Is it important to the content of your engagement that you address questions as you go? Or is it actually more critical that you go through all your content and then save time to answer questions? You'll notice from this particular format, we're using the latter strategy. But have a clear strategy up front. Don't leave it to chance. We've all been in meetings that have spiraled in one direction, and then you've just wished you could have controlled it better. So this is one way to drive a far more relevant engagement for your members. Next, think about what's the equivalent for raising your hand. Again, there's tons of functionality now available in these tools, but make sure that you're actually paying attention to when these triggers come up and you're addressing and acknowledging the questions coming through. And encourage peer-to-peer. One of the unfortunate things about not meeting face-to-face is we miss that peer-to-peer connection. And even though it's a one-to-many type platform, we need to also be able to have people talk to each other. Now that's where the rubber hits the road when it comes to engagement for your members. And that's where they're going to make the relationships that's going to keep them close in your club as well. So recapping rule number 3, manage your questions and have a strategy for it. Be very mindful of that. Rule 4, be inclusive. Think about time zones. Think about the differences. Is it good morning? Is it good afternoon? Is it good night? Is it a little bit of everything for the group that you're talking to? Be inclusive for other reasons too. We have speakers from every different, from multiple languages present with us today. We have viewers and listeners and attendees who are familiar with different languages. Speak at a pace that will be comfortable for most so that everybody is able to follow you. Use closed captioning where your platforms actually allow you to do that. And I do believe many platforms today even do live translation as you're speaking. So you want to be inclusive of everyone attending. You want people to be able to understand what you're saying. Finally, consider things like bandwidth, platforms, devices. If someone's unable to turn on their video, that's fine, right? The important thing here is that we're inclusive of anyone who wants to participate. We find a way to help them do exactly that. Finally, pause. We're all running back to back, sitting in front of a little screen, and we're exhausted at this point in time. Sometimes taking a moment to actually pause in a jam-packed agenda can be more impactful than trying to get through absolutely everything you want to get through. So it's okay to build in moments of silence. Rule number 5, add a bit of sparkle, and by sparkle I mean software. There's tons of really cool ways in which you can engage your audience today. My personal favorite is Kahoot, but there's a whole bunch listed here that I'd urge you to go check out. Anything that just gets people engaging, that actually gets them looking away, looking at each other, comparing, contrasting, having a bit of a joke, makes it that much more meaningful and engaging. So these are my 5 super simple rules. I'm going to give you 5 bonus rules before I wrap up for my section. Often when we're sitting still, and more often than we like, we sit in one spot and go straight for 8 hours these days, we actually start to sound really tired, or we start to sound really bored. So every now and then mix it up, stand up, do a bit of talking as you stand, or take a walk and turn your video off and talk. That just helps you bring life back into your engagement as well. And it is energizing for yourself. 2, find a way to bring that one-on-one engagement with key people that you're engaging with in groups offline from these main engagements. So I know we may not be able to meet in person, but again, do a quick check-in, like call them, send them a WhatsApp text, send them a text, check in on them so that you're continuing to drive what would have been that in-person dynamism. 3, facial expressions. Don't be afraid to use facial expressions. This is who you are. It's part of being authentic. And it helps you bring your voice in a meaningful way. So if you need to, keep a little mirror beside you and do a check before you kick off, but we're all used to seeing a little version of ourselves on the screen as well. It's always a good idea to make sure that you feel fully comfortable how you're presenting yourself. It drives a much deeper engagement with your attendees. 4, mute using the headset button. I'm not using a headset right now, but very often that's a faster way to mute. So if you're in larger group engagements, it's just a much cleaner way to manage your audio flow. So it's less noisy for the attendees. Finally, use a lot of examples where you can. Use examples, make it relatable, keep them quick, but keep them frequent. And that should give you a fairly engaged audience. Thank you so much. I appreciate your patience as I've shared my 5+5 tips. I will now hand it back to Dr. Anne and wait for your questions further down the road.
Good, thank you, Sheerah. Thank you very much. Now, our next speaker is Sheerah. Thank you, Sheerah. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you virtually. So I'm talking about not only communication and how to engage, but actually how to network and how to use digital networks as a platform nowadays. As I'm the communication officer for BPW Europe, actually in the beginning, we had to kind of nail down our strategy, as Darshini said, and Lisa, on what kind of channels do we want to use for what kind of audiences. And I mean, we all know now Zoom, we all know now how to make virtual meetings a success within BPW. But what about other engagement and networking opportunities? And there are actually a lot of new apps out there, new platforms. And there is one particular platform that I'd like to share with you guys, which is called Mighty Networks. I will briefly show you an example and the homepage. And one of the reasons why I want to showcase this is because it's a very easily manageable platform. It's not an app. It's not like Slack, where you need to actually download an application and install it on your desktop. It's actually a fully online available platform. Mighty Networks, it's called. I'm going to share it right now. So let me share my desktop with you guys. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the landing page of Mighty Networks. It's basically a platform that has been created specifically to bring together communities in terms of easy collaboration and communication. The style is more run like a blog, but also you can host events and courses within the platform, and fairly affordable in terms of also when you would consider it either to use it for your BPW affiliate, for your club, or what I'm doing right now, I'm actually considering it for an European level, specifically for the working groups. So if you have more, let's say, internal focused communication, so not external, but actually you can also make it open, so public or private. And if you want to host it on a platform that is easily accessible for everyone, this would be something that I would recommend. If I go now to the example. So this is just an example page I've created for BPW Europe. You can also try it out for 14 days for free if this is something that you want to consider for your BPW club or affiliate or your region. What I've created now here, it's more the working spaces for the working groups or groups where you have dedicated audiences within your BPW network that have specific ideas or maybe collaborative projects they want to work on. So it's a little bit less, let's say, formal than, for example, MS Teams or Slack or other collaboration platforms. So let me just quickly go in maybe to boards with women. And it's very easy. The edits are really, really easy. It's a blog style. Basically, you share whatever is on your mind. You can create articles. You can create polls. You can create questions and answer sections. So if you want to make it public, you could use this style. You can also manage the workspace fairly easy. For example, general settings. You can have a tagline. You have a group description. You can link it to a Facebook page, for example, if you anyway use already Facebook or any other platform on social media. You can enable a members chat. So this is then separate to, for example, using WhatsApp, or actually in many other regions in the world, people are switching from WhatsApp to a more private app or chat app. And actually what you can enable here is a members chat in your working group. So this is something that you can just enable here, where basically when people are getting annoyed from group notifications on WhatsApp, they can keep that part more private, and then here only on the groups. You can add a group branding. Okay, you can add a different theme color, you can add a logo. You know, there is so much more personalization that is enabled, and every moderator can decide whether it's a secret, private, or public group, for example, and you can send invitations out of this. So this is an easy way to connect different groups within your BPW network to work on projects or working groups or task forces or teams that go a little bit beyond the normal, let's say, work mode range. Or even for committees, we could create, for example, one group only for presidents. So this is why I had it in mind, because the presidents meet on very different platforms, but actually to collaborate and to discuss topics that are relevant on a regional level, there is currently non-existing. So that's why I'm currently exploring this, and this is what I wanted to show you guys. I'm opening again the main page. They're called Mighty Networks. And I think a plan starts from $33 per month. So it's actually quite affordable, and it's very easy to manage right here. Other options, as I mentioned before, a more, let's say, a free option that is available would be Slack, where you can collaborate and connect, but it's not as easy as, you know, inviting new people in and actually creating off-the-shelf training course platforms, etc., which is available here. So I'll give it back to Yasmin. Thank you very much for listening in.
Thank you very much, Sheerah. Now, our next speaker is Dr. Alexandra.
Hi, everyone, and good morning and good afternoon, depending on your location. I hope everyone is doing great, and I'm honored to present today to the BPW, and the topic that I have for the discussion today is the cybersecurity. So now that we went into discussion of different platforms that we use and different tools that we use, just wanted to talk a bit about security and privacy considerations for that. With that, we'll cover a couple of things today. First, we'll talk a bit about why is it important for us to consider those topics, especially for us as leaders. Then I'll discuss the risks that relate to cybersecurity and data protection and privacy, and we'll close with the steps that we can take and what we can do as BPW leadership to address those. So why is it important? All the speakers before me talked about the platforms that we use and how the digital world supports BPW. And digital world is really where we are now, especially with the COVID implications, as well as with global collaboration. So the reality is that we have to collaborate across borders, and it opens a lot of opportunities for us to connect to our members, to connect to each other, to connect to other nonprofits, to connect to other organizations, and work together as one big team. But as we do so, we are mainly supported by digital tools, and those digital tools, a lot of them run on the internet. So we use the data, we transfer the data, we also use social media a lot. A lot of the clubs, for specific events or for the membership management, so also use e-commerce sites, platforms. And most of us by now use cloud technologies. So all those technologies provide great opportunities, but they also come with their risks. And one of those is handling the personal data. As we have personal data to our members, personal data related to our prospective members, to other community stakeholders, and it's not personal data, it's pretty much any data that can identify an individual. So it doesn't have to be confidential. So name, email addresses, all of this is personal data. And we are required to protect the data and to protect the privacy of the individuals. And that becomes even more important when we are dealing with special projects and we deal with the data subjects that require special protection, such as youth, children, and as well as the information that we may collect that may be sensitive to the individuals, their ethnic origin, their political views, and it's a nature of the non-profit organizations that we process that data a lot. And it is our responsibility to protect the data of those individuals, to protect their privacy, as well as to protect the security of our operations as BPW. So what are the risks that come to that? First is personal safety and security. In some instances when sensitive personal data or personal data is exposed, such as, for instance, if we are handling a project that we are helping victims of domestic violence, it's very important for us to keep their private information very safe and secure, and keep the location very safe and secure. In other instances, it's just not exposing information to data breaches and to potential security risks. And those security risks can come from many places. If we are using websites, those websites could be vulnerable to some of the security weaknesses. If we are using social media platforms, those social media platforms may become the place for the phishing attacks. If we are using some other special platforms where we share the data can be compromised as well. So, and to be very vigilant in that respect. It's also important because that in the end poses the reputational and brand risk for us as BPW. For instance, if we are using a BPW website and that website becomes compromised and our members are affected because of that, that may mean losing trust of our members and stakeholders. Also, exposing personal data to the breaches can be a significant risk. And both from a reputational perspective, from financial perspective, and regulatory as well. For instance, in the UK, there have been a number of instances when non-profit organizations have been fined by the data protection regulator for not being compliant with their data protection and not having appropriate safeguards around the data privacy. We operate in very different jurisdictions, so there are also very different privacy laws. Most of them follow the same concepts, such as privacy by design, that is in the core of GDPR in Europe, the core of the UK, as well as the regulations that come in other countries. But we need to be mindful of first doing the right thing and protecting our members, protecting the data that we collect and process, and also be mindful of our compliance requirements. So what can we do to address those risks? First thing is, it always starts with the governance. Having appropriate understanding, having appropriate processes in place with your clubs, knowing what platforms are we using, how are we using it, what data we are collecting there, and always collecting just the minimum data that we need, as well as having privacy notices on our website to make sure that we are very transparent to the members and stakeholders in respect to what we do and how we protect our members. And in that, that's what differentiates us as well. Doing the right thing and having strong governance is the core BPW as Business and Professional Women Club. There are also some technical things that we can do, making sure both on the personal level and on the club level that we protect our members' information if we store it on the personal computers, that we have antivirus, encryption, but also on the club level when we have agreements with the website developers or with new platforms, making sure that we understand their policies in regards to the security of the data, in regards to the privacy of the data, and we know what safeguards are in place, and that's all part of their agreements. But most important of all is being aware and being vigilant. If we see something that is not right, discussing it with club's leadership, understanding the impact and just being aware of the security and privacy risks that the platforms may pose, and also how we can respond to those. And just hope everyone stays safe and secure. And thanks everyone. And if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat or reach out to me. Thank you so much. Dr. Yasmin, back to you.
Thank you very much. Anne, do you want to open the floor for questions?
I will, thank you. Okay, thanks to each of our speakers. That was wonderful and comprehensive from 4 very different perspectives, and also building on one another at the same time. We want to open this up for 15 minutes or so of discussion for your questions or comments. If you will find the icon probably at the bottom of your screen called reactions, or whatever that might be in your language, you'll find there the raise hand function, and that will alert us to your desire to speak and also put you in a queue. So if you'd like to speak, please click on that and I'll be looking for you. Who would like to speak first? Any questions or comments? Otherwise, I'll start calling on people. Okay, Mona, you're up first.
Greetings, ladies. Thank you very much. I'm from Jordan, though I'm an Arab American, hence the accent. All of them were fantastic. I appreciate that. And I'm a firm believer in communication and the importance of digital. Wanted to ask you about the cybersecurity. Are you talking about investing in a platform, or we talked a lot about digital presence. Within that, do you have a preferred security company technology that you would advise us, Alexandra, to use versus another? Because you know, data is important and the trust is significant for the women in the club.
Absolutely, it is. Data is crucial to what we do. When it comes to the platforms, believe that generally as BPW, we are quite agnostic, and different clubs are using different platforms and technologies, and understandably different clubs also have different skills. So it's not one size fits all. So I would say it's more having the overall policy to make sure that if we store personal data on the cloud, we understand where the cloud is located, where it's stored, what are the safeguards of that cloud, and if we store on our personal laptops, making sure that our personal computers have antivirus enabled, have firewalls, and ideally we password protect the data to keep it encrypted as well.
Okay, Mona, does that address your question? Or did you have any follow-up?
Thank you very much. And also the My Network connection. Thank you for the link. It's something interesting to explore. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe a comment from my perspective as communications officer for BPW Europe. It depends a little bit on your region and the data privacy and data protection rules. So for example, in Europe, we use, for example, for the newsletter, we use a different platform than the international one. So BPW International, for example, uses MailChimp, which is a free and I mean, fairly, I think, very generally used newsletter platform and service. However, we also have actually an IT person that is advising us in these respects. And when we had a first conversation about the newsletter of BPW Europe, we decided to go with Sendinblue, which is a different platform that is a little bit more secure and has maybe from a reputational perspective, a better standpoint than MailChimp. So this is a maybe very practical example, but it depends also on what kind of platform you're using, and that there is a general rule of engagement. Also, for example, if you use Slack as a collaboration platform, maybe it's still recommendable not to share any truly sensitive information on those free to use platforms. And I guess that's a general rule that one can follow. And there on YouTube, there's some good guidances on which platforms are actual secure or actually follow the GDPR regulations on data protection.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheerah. And actually, that brings me to 2 points. First of all, you mentioned European regulations, which as of, I think, 2 years ago, became much stronger than ever before. And so it's important to know your privacy regulations in your region and also in your specific country, because we may be bound by some of those regulations. And Alexandra, you probably mentioned that, but so I may have zoned out for a moment. The other thing I wanted to mention, not specific to this topic, was I was about to say, in fact, to our 4 speakers, please also feel free to jump in. You may well have comments adding something you may have neglected to mention during your own presentation, or you may have comments on other presentations or questions. So we want to make sure the floor is open to all of you as well. Who would like to jump in next? Dr. Yasmin, did you want to make any comments?
Yeah, I'm very impressed of this information that we received, and how important is that we really be aware of the new technologies and also the risks that now we are, all of us are in this new age. So what I want to know, how can we manage a roster in a web page with the security? Or definitely what you recommended is that we didn't show, we just avoid to show names and contact details.
It really depends what we're doing in a particular situation, because as mentioned, names and contact details are personal data that we need to safeguard. Obviously, if we need that to be shared for the purposes of either specific webinar or communication, and then we can either rely on the function that we are doing or ask for a consent. As Sheerah mentioned, for instance, there are requirements when we use things like newsletters, that everything that has to direct marketing, we need to make sure that when we send those, that members have an option to unsubscribe, and they basically that we understand that they consented to being targeted by our newsletters, so that we don't invade their privacy.
I think just to add into that, talking about consent from your audience, this also applies to image that's taken at BPW events as well. I think for me, on my job, this is definitely something that we've come across, like hosting an event for a client, for example, and taking like a photo of the event area. But those audience may not have consent their photo taken. So I think it's having those disclaimers when they register for the event, for example, saying, you know, photos might be taken at the event, you know, clicking this means that you consent your photo being taken. And that I think also can help to prevent any risks.
I think that's a very good point that we need to learn from immediately for all of our conferences and our Congress every 3 years and so on. I don't think we've ever included that consent. And some of those photos are terrible. Anyway, who else would like to?
If you have a disclaimer in the beginning of the event, I guess that's one way to figure it out. And I think it's easier if people actually approach you that are uncomfortable with photos being published, and because the majority of people are very used to social media nowadays, and they know the fact that if they're signed up to social media, that there is always the risk of being exposed in the public with a photo, whether it's a bad or good photo. I guess that's the world we live in right now.
Absolutely. Okay, who else would like to speak? Eva, how about you? Would you like to jump in?
Thank you for the invitation. I'm impressed about the knowledge of all the speakers. And yes, I've written a whole sheet of paper. So yes, we see how we, especially how to engage members online. I like this the best, and yes, we will try to ask many questions and put them into break rooms so they can really network as sitting on a coffee table. Also, that's for our next meeting as a holiday, Weihnachten, Christmas meeting we have now next week. So thank you.
Thanks, Eva. And one of the things Darshini mentioned was how much time we're all spending online for almost 2 years now, in particular, during this time of crisis. And it's the fatigue of being online for yet another webinar like this is very real. So we need to find new and different ways to keep members engaged if we are having an online meeting or event. Otherwise, they'll zone out. Connie, I wonder if you want to jump in. I know that you've converted a lot of your task force education materials to online format recently.
That's correct. That's correct. And I would like to second what Eva said. It was really fascinating to hear the 4 different aspects of the same subject. And my concrete question goes to Sheerah. Sheerah, you introduced Mighty Networks, and I saw that you had all the 5 working groups of BPW Europe already there. And I was wondering, is it just for this presentation, or is this already operational?
So it's unfortunately not operational. I'm currently in the trial phase. I actually did a trial already from a more global perspective last time when we did an actual recording with actually Anne there is a YouTube video on how to use Mighty Network. So there is actually a guide if you're interested to look at that more in detail, where we basically explored what would it mean on a global scale. Would it, for example, replace or actually create, or one could use it as a membership database, for example. There were different options that we were looking at. In the end, on an international basis, I don't think there was a decision made to even introduce a membership database per se. On a European level, I'm exploring it more for a collaboration purpose. So it's not online yet, it's not operational. And if one would introduce such a platform, we would need to first talk to all the presidents. So we would need to address it on a European level and agree whether, at least on a collaboration perspective, to bring everyone on one platform. Of course, it does make sense that on a European regional level, we would open up that platform for everyone in Europe, whether or not, you know, a club would like to use it or an affiliate. So there are different aspects of looking at this, because from a regional perspective, I would believe that the Professional Women's Network should provide a certain level of service also to their members, right? So I guess it is in discussion, but you know, as a communication officer, I always try to explore new areas, but maybe it won't be introduced. But for now, each working group has its own collaboration methodology, which is very chaotic. So it would be maybe a good way to streamline.
So that's for next year, project for 2022.
Fingers crossed.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, Connie. I'm sure you'll have the support of your regional coordinator, who can't join us in these meetings anymore because of her work schedule, but I'm sure she would be supportive of that too. Christine, what is the digital capacity in New Zealand? And by the way, you always win the prize, sad prize that it is, for being the latest time zone to join our meetings. I think it's
earliest. It's
1 or 2 in the morning. Yeah, it's almost 2 in the morning. Oh yeah. So how about to the digital capacity in New Zealand?
One of our big issues is actually having someone with the capacity to run them or start them and get everything going and being done, you know, correctly. And we do find like we're actually pretty much stuck at the website side of it. We have some really good Zoom meetings. We're doing online events every couple of months that's starting to pull in the general population to listen to our speakers. So that side of it's going well, but we're sort of really struggling along the lines of getting a website that's easily workable, that can shift from one executive to the next without any major issues, and a lot of discussion on everything that can be done cheaply online or free. And sometimes that's just not the way to go. So yeah, sort of sitting in that half space, I think.
Okay, thanks, Christine. Now, the rest of the world looks to New Zealand in many ways to lead us. You're usually very progressive, so we're looking to you for digital leadership too, soon. All right, we're coming to the last few minutes of this wonderful presentation today, or presentations really. And Dr. Yasmin, I'd like to turn to you again if you have any last remarks.
Well, not only I think that you will close, but I think that we will need a second part, because I think it's a lot of material that we have to know and explore, and I'm sure that everybody will be very interested in that. So I hope that our brilliant speakers agree to have a second part next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Yasmin. Also, you'll see in the comments, I posted one saying that if you just search on YouTube for BPW Goes Digital, these 4 presenters today, as well as about 20 others, contributed to a long series of videos that Linima and I ran a program for last year. So there is actually a whole library of such. And on our leaders YouTube channel for this series, we have a playlist of all of those videos there as well. So you can find them. So we have a large resource already, but certainly we'll invite you all back and some of the others as well. So I want to thank each of our speakers for your great contribution to this webinar. I want to thank my co-facilitator, Dr. Yasmin, as ever, for this series. And I certainly want to thank all of you for attending today and for your participation in our discussion. We hope to see you again next month. We wish you all happy holidays such as you may celebrate, and stay safe and healthy, and bye for now.